I thought what Professor Ranjay Gulati said about those 4 areas, right? The North Star. Purpose is a North Star. It's directional. It motivates. It's reputational. It can help to increase reputation as well. It's part of contributing to the ecosystem and partnerships. If you think about that, those are things that we have been talking about in the Alliance for Action for Corporate Purpose. Those are themes which have arose from the ground up as well. So it is a great way to see, right, that whatever that has been researched as well also validates the corporate purpose framework and blueprint that you have in front of you too. And of course, for myself and my team, we are very grateful to be part of this journey as well. But before I dive into the questions, maybe just to recollect some of the concepts that we've heard this morning before lunch. And I do personally think that the concept of corporate purpose is very useful, particularly for the time that we are right now, hopefully going out of COVID into a new season in life, into a new season of business as well. Can we bring more people, more businesses along with us? Particularly important because the issues of the world still confront us, whether it's climate change or whether it's social inequality exacerbated by COVID-19 as well. Food security, something that Minister mentioned just now. And I think what was good clarity was corporate purpose is beyond just programming, is beyond just CSR as well. What else can we do that can be impactful, congruent to our business, which helps to uplift the whole ecosystem, also benefiting the company eventually as well. And that's why I'm so glad that we have this book in front of us, and outside from you will also have a link to the more detailed corporate purpose framework and blueprint that lists out why do we need corporate purpose, and also what are the ways that we can operationalize it, focusing on the environmental, social, governance, people, and the ecosystem as well. So those are some very useful steps that the book tries to help organizations to operationalize, but at the same time as well, case studies that could inspire too. I also wanted to just reflect about this morning's conversation and some quotable quotes that I thought really resonated. How do you blend the corporate purpose into the business? Blending corporate purpose into the business. And I think from Ayala, it is possible. It is possible to blend this into the business, to create a great company, but at the same time as well, to actually create impact where it's much needed in that particular country. And I think that what Delan said around that if you are going to a place where you profit from, surely you must also benefit the place that you actually do business in as well. And also some clarity that actually profit is not a bad word, but profit with purpose is where we really want to get to. What else can we do, given our nature, given the characteristic of the business that we can do more in? And with that, I think let's go into the conversations. And I'd just like to have a brief introduction of my panelists, esteemed panelists here. Firstly, Mr. Bey Soo Khiang. Mr. Bey serves as the Vice Chairman of RGE and the Chairman of April Group since 2011. At RGE, he oversees all its business groups in areas such as sustainability, continuous improvement, and digital transformation. So he, I think, is quite familiar with how is it that you prioritize sustainability efforts, impact efforts, but at the same time as well, business efforts as well. And I think those are also interlinked. The profit impact purpose part, I think, is interlinked, and I would love to hear more about how he has done that. He always tells me this word called Kaizen, right? Kaizen is also super important in terms of making those kind of step transformations, even when it comes to corporate purpose as well. Next up, Samir. Samir is the Chief Marketing Officer for Personal Care and the Chair for UniAsia Private Limited. He has been at Unilever for 25 years and with deep experience in leading big purpose-led categories and P&Ls at the same time. So it's really interesting to see that, it is not distinct, is it? You can have a P&L, make it good as well, but at the same time, have a purpose-led type of a business too. And of course, making sure that he puts sustainability, purpose, and creativity. You do need creativity to solve some of these problems at the heart of business growth. So I would love to hear very much from Samir as well. Okay. We'll go on to the first question, if you don't mind. And just FYI, there is this QR code that you can actually use as well to just punch in your questions as you go along. So feel free to punch in those questions. I just want to let you know that through COVID, I've developed short-sightedness. So I might not be able to actually see the questions. So if I read them wrongly, apologies in advance. Right? So let's maybe just go on with the first question. Prof. Ranjay said something just now, which kind of made me sit up. He said that, writing a purpose statement is the simple part, right? But actually, the next steps is where it is super tough. So, and he's referring to the implementation part. He said that the purpose is actually a North Star and understanding of principles as well. So, if I may refer to Mr. Bey and Samir, maybe Mr. Bey first and Samir, can you share about how you make purpose tangible, embedded? Just now, Delan said that he does things which are ground up, so that he gives information and facts so that people understand it, so it's easier to actually live that, right? So how is it that you embed corporate purpose in your respective organizations? Perhaps Mr. Bey first and then Samir?
Thank you for your kind introduction, Eu-Lin, and thank you for having me here. It's a tremendous privilege to be able to share what we have done. I don't promise that I have all the answers. I'm just sharing what we have done. Okay. For context, RG is privately owned and has many companies, mostly in the bioeconomy business, and also a small gas business. Bioeconomy means growing trees, and like palm oil trees, and fiber or eucalyptus trees. We operate in Indonesia, China, Brazil, and Canada. So they are all developing countries. So you have to bear that in mind for the context of what I'm sharing is in the developing country environment. We are headquartered in Singapore though, and our asset value exceeds more than $30 billion in asset. The company is privately owned, and the shareholder has asked all the companies to operate with the purpose of improving lives while managing resource sustainably. And we operationalize that through what we call the 5 Cs, that companies, all our business units must do good for the community, good for the country, good for climate, good for the customers, then it'll be good for the company, right? And before 2015, April, one of the companies, April actually grows eucalyptus and acacia in our plantations. They grow for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, we harvest them, and then we replant. And the harvested trees are taken to the mill to produce products like paper, tissue, board packaging, viscose rayon clothes, and wet wipes, and so on and so forth. So they are products which everyone needs, and that's how we touch the lives of customers, so to speak, and improve their lives. So we operate with the purpose of 5 Cs, right? And prior to that, we were very focused on doing community work through 3 Cs. 3 E's, key thing about elevating poverty through education, empowerment, and enhancement. Education is really to intervene in schools to improve the quality of education, especially in the schools in the remote areas where we operate. So we improve infrastructure, we improve the teaching skills of teachers and principals, and so on and so forth. The second element is empowerment. Again, to elevate poverty, we want to increase the income of adults, the farmers, and so on and so forth. And we bring them in to teach them how to be better farmers. And even give them alternative career like mechanical repair of motorbikes, and so on and so forth. And the last E is, of course, enhancement, right? Giving them clean water, sanitation, electricity, and so on and so forth. Now, in 2015, the UN launched the SDGs, and then there was a Paris Climate Agreement. right? And if I may take a step backwards first, before that, from a forestry plantation point of view, we manage the forest sustainably. We actually only operate 50% of the land concession we have as plantation. The other 50% are conserved, so to speak. Some of it are given to community for land. And we have an explicit commitment that for every hectare of plantation we have, we want to have 1 hectare of conservation area. Okay, so that's the climate part, and then of course the community part. Then 2015 UN SDG came out, as I was just saying, and we saw the opportunity to embed the SDG into our 5 Cs. Of course, we don't know how to do it, so we got PwC to come and help us, to embed the SDGs into our 5 Cs. And we wanted to do something more than just maintaining status quo. So we wanted to come up with a 10-year roadmap, a 10-year plan. And we wanted to use that as a process. The process of getting that is as important as the end product, so to speak, because we saw that as a change management. How do we get everyone in a company, from the senior leadership to the guy on the shop floor, buy into our purpose statement, buy into our plan, and be committed to it? So the first thing we did is we want to make sure the process will give a sense of unity and purpose for everyone in the organization. So we got a group of people, representative of agenda, grade level, even different kind of tribes. In Indonesia, there are a lot of kind of tribes, so to speak. And they were formed into groups to just discuss about the broad thrust, what they think are the key issues related to the 5 Cs. Of course, at the end of it, we came to discuss, and we came up with 4 major thrusts, which we all agreed as an organization, from the top to the bottom, so to speak. One is climate positive, which speaks essentially to decarbonization plan, right? And then second one is we call thriving landscape, because we have conservation area, we have plantation area. We want to make sure that this conservation area are also well maintained, and there's 0 loss of biodiversity there. And we actually, in order to maintain a conservation area, we actually made an internal commitment that for every ton of wood I bring from a plantation, I will commit $1 to a conservation fund, which I will use to fund the activities of conservation areas, like restoration of degraded areas, even looking after biodiversity, flora and fauna, so to speak. And we committed ourselves to 0 loss of biodiversity from then onwards. Okay. And then the third thrust was really about people, inclusive progress, and rather than just talk about elevating poverty, we're more specific now, using the SDG as a basis, because previously when we say do good for community, this is what I think is good for community. But with the SDGs and the UN performance report cards of the countries, in particular Indonesia, we could clearly identify, Indonesia is very poor performing, for instance, in this issue of stunting. I do not know how many of you know what is stunting. Stunting essentially a phenomena among kids in the first 1,000 days. 1 to 3 years old, essentially. If there are lack of nutrition, lack of sanitation, then their physical development are affected, are slowed down, and that affects the intellectual, and every aspect. And it's not only a short-term impact, it's throughout the life cycle. And Indonesia is very poor performing. They are the bottom, I think, 3 countries in the world. And Indonesian government wants to do something about it. So as a business, we say, okay, let's join force with them. We commit to 50% reduction of stunting, right? And then, of course, we talk about eliminating extreme poverty, in our areas of operations, identifying close to 200 over villages that we are going to intervene in these places. And the third one really is about gender equality. And of course, we continue with the quality education aspect. Then the fourth pillar is really about sustainable growth, looking into this aspect of circularity. So once our people have decided on that, we all agreed, then we broke the groups up in a second phase because we wanted to make sure that people down the line has a sense of ownership and accountability. So we broke up the groups to align them with the major trusts. For instance, a fiber plantation head will be looking after climate positive or thriving landscape. And that way, we asked them to work on the targets, and then their KPIs. Of course, the challenge at that time was really to push for ambitious target, but they were pushed back and making sure that they are realistic, achievable. And the third stage is, once that happens, now we feed that into their KPIs, their annual performance. And through their annual budget plans, they then have to come up with plans to achieve on an annual basis what they want to do in these respective pillars, so to speak. Now, I want to say here that we chose 2030 and not 2050 because 2030 is a lot more direct line of sight for a lot of us, senior management especially. I know organization choose 2050, but we thought that 2050 is too far beyond. Some of the senior management may not be around at all by 2050. And therefore, it's important that we chose a time horizon which they feel accountable, they feel that they will be there, right? So that's the third stage. And the fourth stage really is to make this all totally transparent to people, to have that sense of accountability on their part that I have declared to the public, to all the people in the company that this is what I'm going to do, and therefore, I'm going to do it, so to speak. So we have a public launch within the company as well as to the other external stakeholders as well. So that's how we have embedded 2030, so to speak, and we make an annual report through our sustainability report, progress of the 2030 targets. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Bey. A lot to process there, but I actually do think that you've thought about it in a very, what I call Mr. Bey Soo Khiang way, very structured, orderly, and which is great because I think you have lived through it, right? The whole conceptualization to the operationalization of that, and there's this related question here. Actually, my short title is not too bad, or the screen might be, the words are quite large. So I think one of the questions is, as a privately owned company, right, how has the philosophy and beliefs of the family owners shaped the company's corporate purpose? But before I go on to that, I just wanted to just add on to the point about SDGs. Just now, Mr. Bey talked about hanging, the operationalization on a framework. And the chosen framework here is SDGs. But I think one must be careful as well because use the SDGs effectively. If you use it at a goal level, you don't have much information, but use it at the target level, which will give you a lot more information in terms of what exactly are the targets or the gaps to be met. And the other area that Mr. Bey said as a tip would be to form groups, to bring them along, inclusive, and then so that they understand and then to implement it as well. But just very briefly, Mr. Bey, just a related question here about family business, family-owned company, and their own views about corporate purpose and to operate before we go on to Samir for his views as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm fortunate that the owner of the business, the family firmly believes in it. In fact, we operate on their direction, so to speak. When I joined the company in 2011, they were already operating on that basis. And a lot of it is due to their own previous experience because the owner had some negative experience before building a pulp mill in Medan area or Lake Toba area, and they had lots of social issues, which then caused business disruption to the business. So he understood that until and unless, the community around you benefits from what you do in that area, potentially they can give you problems, blocking your gates. And especially in the way we operate, we have to transport wood from our plantation all the way to the mill, and in a lot of areas, there's only a single road. And all they need is to block the road, then your wood supply will be a problem, and that disrupts your business, right? But more than that, they do believe very firmly in elevating the well-being and welfare of the people in the community. because they did not come from a rich family originally, So I'm fortunate in that sense that even in the second generation, the values are well transmitted to them and they're well taught, and they were always behind this, and they were deeply involved in the 2030 process. And after April, we then cascaded down to all our other business units. So every of our business now have a 2030 plan, and reporting it annually on that basis.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Bey. My view about 2030 is this, right, is that 2030 is where a lot of things happen, whether or not it's the approximately halving emissions by 2030, the SDG goals as well. So I do think that we should build up the momentum towards that 2030. I view it as like a prelim exam, so right, for the bigger exam, which is in 2050 and so on. If we do well in this prelim exam, that gives us a lot more confidence, right, and a lot more acceleration for the longer-term goals. So thanks so much for sharing. And I just wanted to, go to Samir now about, sharing a little bit more about how Unilever has actually embedded corporate purpose. And later on, there's this related question as well about embedding purpose. You have a lot of products and many products that all of us use. How do you embed that at a product level versus a corporation level as well? Over to you, Samir.
Now, great to be here. Good afternoon. This is a really dramatic setting. I don't know what those things are which are hanging from the ceiling, but
I don't know. I was looking at it. I was like, is one of them going to fall on me? Hopefully not. Yeah, it's a bit like very King of Throne-ish,
It's good to keep looking at them after lunch hour so you don't take a little nap. But look, for me, a lot has been said about the what of purpose. And I think the one thing I would add to what the professor said was purpose, if you get it right and integrate into your business model, is a way to drive growth. So purpose drives growth, and then because you have growth, you can come back and do purpose. Otherwise, purpose becomes charity and something you do on the side, and that's not a repeatable model. And I think someone asked here about what is the original purpose, because that's an important question to ask. If you want to find what the purpose of a brand or a business is, get into its DNA, get into its founding. And when William Lever launched Sunlight and Lifebuoy in 1893, he wanted to stop the spread of cholera in Victorian England, because he understood that by doing some good for society, he would be driving business. And that would then do more good for society. And therefore, our purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. But like you asked, it's not just about a corporate purpose, because no one buys into Unilever. As the global chief marketing officer of personal care, I lead brands like Dove, Rexona, Lifebuoy, Lux, Pepsodent, Close-Up. These are all billion-euro brands. Dove is a 5 billion euro brand. Its largest market is, in the US. But the way we run these brands is to say, is your purpose authentic and something which you can genuinely influence? We don't want statements of great nobility, which you can't do, because, we have made mistakes, and sometimes we've ascribed a purpose to our brands that a body wash or a toothpaste just can't fulfill. So how you manifest that purpose with customers and consumers in a way that is relevant and in a way that creates competitive advantage, I can't stress more the importance of that. And once you do that, once you have the expression, and for us, remember, it's not just these 7, 8 brands I mentioned, but we have 50 brands, from Hellmann's to Sunsilk to Magnum to Ben & Jerry's. How do you execute, once you have your purpose, once you have the consumer and customer manifestation, how do you execute it with consistency? Because my experience is that companies and brands get tired of their purpose before consumers do. And if you have to register your purpose, it takes many years, it takes decades. So you better be sure that you've got the right one, because then you need to invest for 10, 20, 30 years. I handle a brand called Lifebuoy, which is now the world's largest hygiene soap. And we have a purpose there of saving lives, because just by the act of washing hands, we can lessen diarrhea and pneumonia in Asian and African countries. So 12 years back, I started what was the world's largest behavior change program, which we still run. We have not changed the articulation of it. we haven't got bored with it. And now we have touched 1.5 billion people directly with our hand washing program. So I think that's the power of consistency. And then the final thing I would say on how do you embed purpose is, a purpose must mean something in terms of what you do, but also what you cannot do. So, as you know, Dove, I'm hoping a lot of you are Dove users here. The purpose of the brand is to celebrate real beauty. To go away from sort of the artifice of beauty that a lot of other brands talk about. But to do that, there are a lot of things Dove can do, but there are a lot of things that Dove cannot do. We cannot do things which sort of, some of the beauty industry kind of forces a lack of self-confidence among young girls. We will never, ever, ever on Dove do anything that does that. So that of what we won't do also defines what our purpose is. So I think it's obviously having the values and mission of the parent of Unilever and being consistent for 100 years to that, but then using purpose in a way that is consumer relevant so that consumers will pay even a premium to acquire that brand because they know that brand stands for something more than its functional benefit.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Samir. And I actually really love the Dove product and also what it stands for. And I think, just to summarize, what really resonated to me was you have a corporate purpose generally at Unilever. There is corporate purpose for the products that you sell, but they are congruent, to your overall corporate purpose at the corporate level, which makes sense. And I love the whole, what you say about authenticity and what is it that you can do and can't do. So I think Dove is one great example, Lifebuoy, particularly during the COVID-19. So very well done, to both these organizations for being such leading lights in terms of impact, right, and corporate purpose. I want to just move swiftly along to the next question. This is more around being able to deep dive a little bit more on the benefits of corporate purpose, of embedding corporate purpose. And Prof. Ranjay Gulati just now highlighted the 4 areas, right, that he believes are the benefits of having corporate purpose, which is that, look, you can use corporate purpose as a North Star, it's directional. It motivates people, unlocks potential, even productivity, is great for your reputation. But at the same time now, it's a sifting process to actually work with the partners that you want to and also contribute to the ecosystem as well. Those make sense, but I would like to hear a little bit more about how did that materialize, or what were the benefits that you saw for your own organization? You talked about Dove, right? Tell me a little bit more about some of these real life, even war stories. I know that it's not easy, and I know that whilst there might be benefits, like with any type of change management projects, there are things which are spiky. So tell me a little bit more, maybe Samir first, about what were the benefits when you were doing these purpose-led type of implementation, and what are the things that you just got to look out for? Yeah, Samir and then Mr. Bey. Yeah, Samir. Yeah.
No, that's a great question. I think the big one that I talked about, which to me is the foundational benefit, is that purpose integrated into the business model drives growth. And if that is not happening, it's not a self-sustaining model. It will sooner or later drift away because a company ultimately has to drive growth. So I won't talk any more about that, but what we have found is, I think as the professor also remarked, that not just for us, but even for our competitors, brands which are seen as more purposeful grow 2 to 3x faster than brands which are not. So this is, there is empirical evidence for it. But there are other benefits as well. I mean, one of the benefits that has surprised me is that often purpose and the commitment to sustainability lowers cost because it makes you more energy efficient. At least that over a decade is what has happened in Unilever. It reduces risk, corporate and institutional risk, because when you're dealing with various things around palm oil, plastics, etc., there is an element of corporate risk also which you need to address, which is not just directly linked to growth in the market. But I think the most surprising and delightful impact that I have seen is on our employees, and especially Gen Z who want to join our company. I really feel the work that we have done on our brands, even more than Unilever, it's about the brands, is that young people want to work on brands which have a larger purpose. You know, they want to get out of bed not to sell a soap, but they want to get out of bed to save lives. It's that simple. And there is enough data from Kantar, from Razorfish, and the various studies that people are, again, 60% more disposed to joining your company if they believe that you have a purpose that you actually implement. And that for me is another important thing, because if consumers start to believe that a brand is purpose washing, that it is inauthentic, that it doesn't do what it says, then there is also equally a bigger negative reaction against you. And I think that's what we have to be careful. And you asked about, what are the lookouts? And for a company like ours, I think the biggest lookout is that we have to walk the talk. Okay. That if we say something on plastics, we don't have to do it just in one part of the world on a particular brand. Of course, you will start and you will phase things out, and that's how it happens. But the commitment has to be to do it on all the brands. And even in the way we talk about brand purpose, you have to be credible. And like I was saying, we have made mistakes in the past. There have been brands like Axe, etc., where we started talking of toxic masculinity and male bullying, etc., that were very worthy causes, but didn't fit a brand like Axe, which young men were using for attraction and fragrance. So I think it's also very, very important to stay true to your DNA and what that brand is credible for. And now that we have again brought Axe back to its core DNA of sort of attraction delivered with wit and humor, but based around fragrances, that circle then sort of again starts to work for the brand. So I think every brand has to kind of chart its own course.
And X is not for, I've never tried X before, because it's not for women, is that right?
Women can use it, but I have seen more younger men use it than others.
Okay, got it. All right, don't go there. Right. So, coming back to the topic, so what I'm hearing, Samir, is that you have seen empirical evidence that it can improve growth, but you took a very pragmatic approach. Look, sometimes you try, it's not working out. Okay, let's draw a line under it. So 2 to 3 times growth. You talked about lower costs, energy efficiency, but I think for companies who are looking for capital, I think it's also, or growing, it could also be a lower cost of funding as well, potentially. And I think the key here is to be very deliberate about the consistency part, which is, I think you also mentioned about that in your earlier response as well, Samir, and also to be careful about purpose washing as well. They've got greenwashing, rainbow washing, now you've got purpose washing. Right, so, Mr. Bey,
just
add on?
To add to your point of empirical evidence, right? I mean, certainly, our purpose, the way we run the business on that basis became one of the key components of the employee value proposition, and recruitment, retention rates went up, and even engagement rates, employee engagement. We do survey almost every year. And the engagement rates have never been higher, during last few years, mainly because I think I attribute it to the way we embedded the purpose statement, that there was great involvement of the people and there's a sense of ownership. In terms of financial benefits, I mean, we did about $2 billion worth of sustainability-linked loan in the last couple of years. And as a sustainability guy, I'm very happy that the business have agreed to go on that basis, because now I also have the bank as my partner to monitor them in terms of tracking them in terms of performance, because these sustainability-linked loans are linked to specific KPIs in sustainability as well. In terms of profitability, I mean, certainly, as a business, earlier, Eu-Lin talked about Kaizen. One of our core values is continuous improvement. So we adopted the Japanese concept of Kaizen. Once a month, we do projects to really look at eliminating excessive consumption of energy, water, and so on and so forth. And that directly not only contributes to the cost, reduction of cost, but also reduction of carbon emission. And now with the renewed emphasis on reduction of carbon emission, the business took on a lot more focus on looking for such projects to really. So as a result, profitability went up because costs came down, and its costs coming down year after year on a very gradual path, So that's, and it's very important for our type of business because we are in commodity business. And our philosophy really is that we want to be one of the lowest cost producer, so that we want to be the last man standing when the price of commodity drops, which happens very often. We still make a little bit of money. Of course, when prices are very high, we can laugh all the way to the bank, so to speak. Yeah. So those just to elaborate on the benefits. Yeah.
Excellent. So I think I'm hearing again one more time about there are kind of frameworks or solutions around whether or not it's the SDGs or it's the use of Kaizen. It is a win-win. Sometimes a win-win-win. Reduce your so-called consumption, but it also reduces emissions as well. And just to share about, just to elaborate the point that Mr. Bey shared about sustainability-linked loans. I think it is, personally, I think it's a very good tool. I mean, we can further deepen the market here in Singapore for sustainable finance. But I think Mr. Bey's wish for the loan also was also to more around the target. So sustainability-linked loans is what we call sustainability performance targets. And once you meet that target, you get also revisions in terms of the interest rate applied as well, which again can be win-win. So I do think that sustainable finance is a good tool, and the frameworks for that, the taxonomy for that is strengthening from revision to revision. So do look out for that as well. I want to head on to the next question, which is actually on one of the questions here. And one of the questions here is actually about value chain or supply chain. Which, I think one of those questions that I wanted to ask as well, right? We are not a monolithic kind of, business community. It's made up of larger companies, smaller companies as well, all shapes and sizes. The larger companies have more of an ability, to actually, buy, from these smaller companies. And, smaller companies perhaps, medium-sized companies perhaps may not have the same type of resources than larger companies as well, such as RGE, Unilever. What do you think is the role as part of organizations of your size and, to play in this ecosystem with the smaller and medium-sized organizations, and how and understanding that your impression of what that role is, how do you then implement your purpose towards the smaller and medium-sized organizations, which also aligns to your own purpose as well? How do you make it all win-win-win for that? Yeah. Over to you, Mr. Bey first. Or maybe Samir first. I think he wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Samir, yeah. Oh, okay, all right.
I mean, Eu-Lin, you touch upon a point about responsibility as a big company. And we believe that, we are a force for good, so we collaborate. I mean, that's one of the key words this morning, cooperate and collaborate. Collaborate with our supply chain partners, to introduce to them our sustainability standards, practices, and even work and train with them. And we even leverage our resources to help them achieve the relevant certification. For instance, our palm oil company, Asian Agri, they work with many smallholders, and they got all of them certified RSPO standard. And when the certified oil are sold with a premium, the company actually shares the premium with the smallholders. And that became a virtuous cycle to encourage more and more smallholders to join in this scheme of certification and therefore introduce to them the good practices. For April, we have a lot of contractors, people working on the ground, operating machineries. And, in our Kaizen project to improve processes and the way you operate, we'll bring them in as well, to help them improve the way they operate. And obviously, that will reduce the carbon emissions and so forth as well, right? And as a world largest producer of viscose in the world, as a group, we see ourselves the responsibility to try and bring the sustainability understanding and practices of the whole textile industry. And we started off with Singapore. We actually are co-funding with ESG a sustainability program operated and managed by the Singapore Fashion Council, where all the various players in the value chain of the textile industries, from designers to distributors to makers and so forth, are taught and educated, about sustainability and how we can, as an industry, help reduce the carbon footprint. Already, again, the Fashion Council engaged PwC to do a value chain study as to where the hotspots are and therefore where are the focus, hotspots of carbon emission. And where therefore is the focus, area for us to really target to get a meaningful impact. Again, recycling of textile is a big problem in the world. I think not many of you would know that less than 1% of the textile in the world globally are recycled. Every second there's a truck of textile waste going to the landfill. It's a complex issue because a lot of textiles are blended. It's not homogeneous in terms of properties. Textile are with cotton and so forth. It's all blending, right? So, and again, regulations, country laws that prevent the import of textile waste becomes a hindrance to the ability to bring textile waste to a certain area to recycle. So we also invested with NTU research program, over the next 3 to 5 years. The intent for them is to come up with a urban fit textile recycling plant in Singapore, right? If they can come out with such a design and we will build a pilot plant, and if it succeeds, then, cities can locally recycle the textile waste, and then the recycled pulp can then be exported to our plants, as a feedstock. And that's not a waste, that's a feedstock, So that is a kind of responsibility we take seriously to see how we can enable the industry, the players in the marketplace, and help raise the overall understanding of sustainability.
So thanks so much. So what I'm hearing is that, the number that you said was less than 1% of textiles, right, is recycled, which is quite alarming for me. But just to share with you, this suit over here is from about 3 years ago's Chinese New Year, right? So I am, recycling, using my clothes again and again, okay? But on a more serious note, I think what you've just said was that larger companies have a larger responsibility. There are ways to, upskill and bring along your suppliers as well. So thank you so much for that sharing, Mr. Bey. Samir, you wanted to say something as well. Yeah.
No, I'm quite passionate about this area, and I think that's why Unilever, we've entered into a partnership with NVPC, which I think Tony announced in the first half of the day, which is to bring mentorship, because from all the things that we have done right and done wrong, there is a lot of things that the SMEs, I think, can learn, and we're very willing to share and use our facilities and use all our global expertise. And second is in terms of the way we open up our ecosystem of suppliers, which we are working to make much, much more sustainable, for the larger SME world. And on the first aspect, I think I'll give you an example which I find, really interesting, because again, I keep returning to the way that you make sustainability valuable is to make sure the consumer knows about it. Because we put a lot of extra cost in the system for a particular ESG incentive, but in my business, if a consumer doesn't know, you're not able to charge a premium or get a competitive advantage. If you don't do that, then you don't come back and do it again. So it doesn't become a virtuous cycle. And the example I give is of Dove again, which is the world's biggest body wash and deodorant and has like millions of these plastic bottles that were made out of virgin plastic. And about 3 years back, we decided to change them to 100% post-consumer recycled plastic, which is that every bottle now is made out of other bottles.
Yeah.
But the bottles that came out were slightly gray in color. So what do? And we are very particular about the exact white of the Dove. And we made this a marketing campaign to show that like Dove welcomes diverse beauty in people, we welcome diverse beauty in our bottles. And therefore, gray is the new white. And there is value that particularly Gen Z pays for it, because if they get a signal, it's like brown paper bags versus plastic bags, they sort of pay the premium. So we have 1 million such examples to share about how to incorporate, because, while Unilever is the big company, but the brands that a consumer buys from the shelf, she thinks it's a local brand, right? So there is like 1 million SMEs which kind of comprise the larger Unilever. And then I think on the second thing, which is, let me take one aspect. We also have a climate and nature fund, et cetera. But the aspect that excites me is that what you talked about, that we want to halve our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And we can't do it until our suppliers are with us. And what we found was that 300 of our suppliers were contributing to 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So we are just working with those 300, with our expertise, with our knowledge, sharing all our data, to make them much, much more sort of sustainable and compliant, and to sort of get to our target by 2030. And that's the sort of, a lot of them are based in Singapore and Southeast Asia. And those are the suppliers that we want to make sure that SME has access to, because these are not just sort of, oil suppliers, they're also waste management companies, technology companies, frankly, our agencies and branding companies. So all that ecosystem we want to open. So that's what the partnership, which we call Purpose for Growth, will be about.
Eu-Lin, I want to add that it's just not dealing with your supply chain or suppliers or value chain, right? Because as a company, one of our purpose is to do good for the country, right? And I want to refer specifically to the issue of fire and haze, right? I mean, in Indonesia, the villagers use fire to clear land because that's the quickest, the cheapest means for them to do that. And that caused tremendous amount of emissions, haze, right? And it's not only Indonesia that's affected, it's also Singapore that's affected now and then. And we saw that that is an opportunity for us to help in some way, mainly because we have over the years built up good relationship with the villagers. So we set up what we call a fire-free village program, Essentially, the elements are we hire somebody in the village to become the chief fireman under our payroll. And we use him to educate the people in the village as to the health hazards of fire, right? And we use him also to coordinate with us for a mechanical means to clear land so that they don't have to use fire or matches, so to speak, right? And we even put in an air quality measuring instrument in the village for them to visually see the difference in quality of air. And finally, we commit $10,000 worth of village project, as a benefit for them if the village is fire-free. Okay, now this helps the village head to governize the villagers, making sure nobody uses matches. And we started that in 2013 as a trial. In 2015, we implemented it, and we were very successful during the period. And subsequently, we set up a Fire-Free Village Alliance, where we bring other companies to share best practices and all that. And this is, to me, a clear case of how we can be a force for good for the climate in terms of avoiding carbon emissions through haze and so on and so forth. And it's not only in Indonesia that is positively affected, Singapore also. Right, so that's an example of a purposeful company, seeing opportunities as a company for us to help and to be a force for good. Yeah.
So it's like the key stakeholders in the ecosystem as well. You know, how do you bring them along with an example is the Fire-Free Village or the FFV. I still remember, you know, when, you know, we were working together was one of the key things was, you know, if you want to remunerate as well, there's a way of remuneration too. There's of course money, but actually what's probably they need most is more infrastructure, building bridges, right, for the village. So I think really a lot of great ideas, you know, in the RGE group. I'm afraid we are almost at time. And with that, I just wanted to perhaps ask, you know, my fellow panelists, right, what is one thing that you would like to leave with the audience here? I know all of them are raring to go with implementing corporate purpose and embedding that. So, but what is one thing that you want to leave with them? Samir and then Mr. Bey, yeah.
So I want to use the line saying, brands with purpose grow, people with purpose thrive, and companies with purpose last. But only if you integrate purpose into your business model.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Samir.
Well, I mean, I look around, there are many people here, right? Each of you will have at least 100 employees, you know, and don't forget, all these people are ultimately going to be consumers, right? And if all consumers and people like you get educated, you will demand companies to be purposeful. So the writing is on the wall, the train has left. I know it is quite challenging and quite confusing with many metrics, many standards of reporting and so forth. But I think what is important is, if this is something good that has to be done, just do it, you know, head in the right direction, and then you can do course correction along the way. Okay, so the message really is, just do it.
Just do it, got it. So just to summarize and end off this panel, thank you so much, Mr. Bey. I'm doing it right now, which is to summarize. I think, you know, you're not alone. There are frameworks out there which has like the SDGs, Kaizen, you know, to implement your corporate purpose. But always do that with authenticity and consistency. At the same time, I think, you know, the views are that if you are a larger company, there is also greater responsibility as well. How do you pull along suppliers? Their success is our success as well, particularly an example in terms of the emissions part. And as you strengthen the ecosystem, you benefit as well. And through creating value, there's always customer centricity as well. Are they knowing what you're doing also? So with that, thank you very much for being such a great audience, and thank you for my fellow panelists as well. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.